Welcome to Grab or Stab. I'm Matt McFarland. Here we grab if it's good and we stab if it's not. Today we'll be talking about a sci-fi horror movie directed by the legend John Carpenter, The Thing from 1982. But before we get into all of that, let me explain how decisions are made around this place on whether or not to grab or stab a movie. First of all, it comes down to how good are the kills. Second, the characters. Third, the impact the movie had on the genre. And lastly, how scary is it? Written by Bill Lancaster, The Thing is based on the 1938 John W. Campbell novella Who Goes There. The movie follows a group of American researchers in Antarctica who come across an extraterrestrial life form that assimilates, then assumes the appearance of its victims. The story follows the group as they try to survive and also try to determine who might be the Thing. One of the movie's central themes is isolation, human paranoia, and mistrust within a small community of people, and how quickly trust can change.
And of course, the Thing is a metaphor for whatever you want to say. It's disease, could be AIDS, could be whatever, but it comes from within you. It's also basically the lack of trust that's in the world now. We see it all over, countries, people. We don't trust each other anymore. We don't know who to trust. And that's what The Thing is. It has a lot of truth in it, kind of dressed up as a monster movie.
When The Thing was released, the movie was actually kind of a dud. The US was in a recession and a lot of people didn't like the depressing tone of the movie. That along with the fact that the biggest movie of the year, E.T., was a sci-fi movie about a friendly alien, a little different than this movie. E.T. was also released 2 weeks before The Thing, which didn't help. Definitely a bad idea to release big movies in the same genre so close together. That along with the competition there was in not only the sci-fi genre, but the horror genre that year definitely hurt the movie. I mean, let's go back to 1982. We had E.T., Star Trek II, Poltergeist, Tron, Blade Runner, and Friday the 13th Part 3 that all came out that year. Still though, the movie gained a lot of traction with fans after it was released on home video, and today the movie's been re-evaluated as not only one of John Carpenter's best movies, but one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Tobe Hooper, though, was the original director they had under contract for the movie. You might remember Tobe Hooper as the one who directed the first and the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Tobe wanted the movie to be a horror comedy, but after the producers saw the two scripts he was pitching, they said hell no and fired him. And because Halloween 1978 had been such a monster hit, Universal decided to hire Carpenter, who was a strong candidate for the job since day one. In particular, The Thing gets a lot of praise because it's often seen as the gold standard for practical effects. Even 41 years later, the effects still hold up really well. The effects were created by Rob Bottin, who was only 22 when he started the project.
I saw Halloweem, and I instantly became a John Carpenter fan. He was, that film is just amazing. It amazed me. What was great about it was that John actually did give me a great opportunity to say, hey kid, go nuts, and use your imagination. And he was so supportive during the whole process that it was just, a real amazing thing to happen to a 22-year-old.
Rob either didn't want to pay rent or he's so dedicated to making the effects as best he could that he lived at Universal for a year without taking a single day off. Because of this, though, he ended up in the hospital towards the end of production. Filming for The Thing took place over a 12-week span, partially in Juneau, Alaska, and ending up in Stewart, British Columbia as the main location because it's the snowfall capital of North America. Part of filming was also moved to a lot at Universal. To give the illusion of icy Antarctic conditions in LA, the interior sets at Universal were refrigerated. This, along with cranking up the humidity, helps to give that aura that the location was freezing. Overall, despite the freezing conditions and how much work the movie was, it seemed like most people on set had a great time during the production.
It was so much fun to be with that cast and that director and that crew. I mean, you had like 60 little boys with helicopters and flamethrowers and guns and a monster, and we're up in the Arctic, and I mean, it was a gas, man. It was like going out and playing cops and robbers when you were a kid. It was a fantastic experience.
They had fun making the movie, but did I have fun watching it? Well, before we decide to grab or stab this one, we need to dive into the movie for a bit. And it all starts with a shot of an alien spacecraft entering the Earth's atmosphere, followed by the movie title burned onto the screen, which kind of hints at some things that'll happen later. Next, we read that we're now in Antarctica in the winter of 1982. We also get treated to some incredibly yet subtle music that to me is the epitome of 80s sci-fi horror. The music was composed by Ennio Morricone. Here we watch a helicopter flying across the frozen tundra of Antarctica. The helicopter seems to have spotted something and begins to fly in lower. The helicopter appears to have been tracking this dog, which is running away. What kind of treats did they bring to lure this good boy back? Oh wait, never mind, they're shooting at the poor little fella. However, I imagine it's pretty damn hard to shoot a small object while you're flying, so the dog might be okay. Now we see the United States National Science Institute Station 4 and what goes down at Station 4. Well, a hell of a lot of drinking, smoking weed, and ping pong first of all. Here we see a lot of the crew working at Station 4 enjoying time in their rec room. We then meet R.J. McCready, or Mac as the others call him, played by Kurt Russell, who's the helicopter pilot for the team and in his free time enjoys drinking J&B Rare Blend Scotch and getting his ass kicked in Chess Wizard by the computer.
My move, rook to knight 6. Checkmate. Checkmate.
Cheating bitch.
Fun fact, the female voice of the computer here was performed uncredited by John Carpenter's wife at the time, Adrienne Barbeau. The character of McCready almost went to Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges, but landed on Kurt Russell after they both turned it down.
John was trying to cast the role of McCready, and we spent some time together talking about that, trying to think of other actors. I wasn't involved with the movie, and he was casting the movie and had some of the other roles cast pretty much when he was not finding what he wanted for McCready. And I gave him some suggestions, and we just as friends, we were just talking about it. And then I guess it was about 3 weeks to go, or a month, maybe less than that, he came to me and he said, what would you think about playing it?
The dog then ends up running into Station 4, and as they're clearly in the middle of fucking nowhere, the sound of a helicopter and gunshots tends to bring people outside to see what's going on. I love how Mac comes outside and just keeps drinking. Some of the others come outside as well, and as the chopper circles the camp, they conclude that the words Norge written on the side of the helicopter means Norwegian. The helicopter then unsuccessfully throws a grenade at the dog and then lands the chopper. Really? Nobody's coming out here with a gun? Just in case? Mac is armed and ready to party at least. One of the Norwegians grabs another grenade, gets out of the chopper, and then whoops! The grenade slips out of his hand and his dumbass comrade tries to dig it out of the snow, blowing himself up in the process. Well, at least he gets the award for being the first death in the movie. Do Norwegians really hate dogs this much? The group immediately scatters as the Norwegian opens fire. The Norwegian then waltzes right past the crew and follows the dog. Gary then shoots the Norwegian right in the eyeball from one of the windows. He did. Hell of a shot, too. Besides Gary's incredible set of eyebrows, he's also the station commander and is played by Donald Moffat. The entire group's like, what just happened? But don't you worry, Mac's still hanging onto that bottle. Yeah, you just got shot in the leg. Here, take a sip, George.
First goddamn week of winter.
Max sounds like me every single year when winter hits. I feel like every single person on the planet has suddenly forgotten how to drive in the snow. Inside the compound, Dr. Copper, played by Richard Dysart, is sewing up George Bennings, played by Peter Maloney. Fortunately for Bennings, the bullet just grazed him. Inside the communication room, Dr. Blair, played by Wilford Brimley, wants our radio guy here, Windows, to report this mess. However, they haven't been able to reach anybody on the radio for 2 weeks. Next, we meet Knowles, played by T.K. Carter, who's the station's chef and likes to get around the place on rollerblades. As they examine the body, Palmer enjoys a doob while the others discuss what might have happened. Apparently, the Norwegians have only been stationed there for 8 weeks, which doesn't seem like enough time to get cabin fever. Also, with 2 of them definitely dead, there should be 8 others left. Dr. Copper insists he heads over to the Norwegian station to take a look, and since Max probably still buzzed and sees that the weather's kinda shit, he's not too excited to have to be the taxi driver.
Quit the griping, McCready.
Those clouds keep moving over the sun, we're gonna get a whiteout. We get caught in that, you can scratch 1 doctor and 1 pilot.
Regardless of the weather, they decide to fly out. But the question still remains. Why were these Norwegians willing to die trying to kill this dog? As some of the group seems to be winding down for the day, the dog roams around the station, eventually making its way into someone's room. Specifically whose room, we don't know, as all we can see is a shadow silhouette of the person. The real-life name of the dog in the movie is Jed, who is actually a wolf-malamute mix. As Mac and the doc arrive at the Norwegian camp, they notice that most of the camp seems to have been burned down. The two eventually come across a door with a bloody axe lodged in it. Maybe this is just how Norwegians like to party. Inside, it looks mostly destroyed. Doc notices a blood trail leading to a man in a chair that appears to have cut his own wrist.
My God, what the hell happened here?
As they continue going room by room, Mac eventually stumbles upon a massive block of ice that's been carved out to look like a giant bathtub. All you cold plunge motherfuckers are jealous, aren't you? The doc surmises that maybe the Norwegian crew came across a fossil of some sort and dug it out. But where is it? Outside the camp, they find something even more disturbing, what looks to be some sort of burnt creature with some human features. They decide to bring it back with them to take a closer look. They arrive back at camp and carry the thing inside. Blair looks like me that one year I burnt the turkey on Thanksgiving. The entire group seems speechless as they examine this crispy, fucked up mutation. The puppers also seems a little speechless. Dr. Copper finalizes his autopsy on the dead Norwegian and comes to the conclusion that he seems to be entirely normal. No drugs or alcohol within his system either. Now time for Blair to start slicing up whatever you call this creature. Blair finds that whatever it is, it has a normal set of human organs. Later that evening, Palmer lights another joint while the others play cards and pool. Clark finally puts the new dog in the kennel with the other pups. Aw, new doggy friends. Ah, Jesus, what the fuck is this thing? The other dogs start freaking out as the new guy pops open like a goddamn fly trap with tentacles. It has legs too? As one of the dogs tries eating his way out of there, Clark comes back to see what the commotion is about, but as soon as he opens the gate, he quickly realizes something's not right. Mac hears squealing coming from the kennel, so he immediately sounds the alarm.
I don't know what the hell's in there, but it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
The entire team heads to the kennel to see what's going on, but it's bad enough we need Childs.
Mac wants the flamethrower.
Mac wants the what?
That's what he said, now move!
Yeah, you're gonna need it. The team arrives to find that the pup ain't so cute anymore and has now morphed into some slimy, obese demon creature. This creature was created with a human inside of it controlling this well-done hand puppet with an animatronic face. Not only has the dog turned into this creature, but it's now gotten a hold of some of the other dogs. Mac opens fire, which Clark doesn't like, but this thing keeps growing. Childs, the chief mechanic, who is played by Keith David, arrives. This thing's now got multiple heads, several eyes, and it's just all kinds of nasty. Then, just as the creature goes xenomorph, Child torches it. To avoid any unwanted fires, though, the team then extinguishes the flames after it appears dead. Not that you asked, but Rob Bottin used so much KY jelly on the set to create the slime for scenes like this that on his first day, special effects artist Peter Kieran kinda wondered what kind of movie he signed up for. He was also probably wondering who's gonna be showing who his thing at the end of the movie.
He wanted me to help shoot some tests that he was doing of his vibrating dog, and I think when I got there, there were so many 5-gallon pails of KY jelly all over the place that it's like my impression of the film was, gee, I never knew that you could like buy KY jelly in 5-gallon pails and have so many of them, in any one place. They used so much of it, I believe, on all of his creatures. That's kind of what I think of when I think of working on the film.
The next day, it's now up to the docs to determine what the hell this is. As Blair cracks this thing apart like he's enjoying some king crab back home, they start dissecting this nasty sumbitch. Blair concludes that this organism can imitate other life forms and imitate them perfectly, absorbing its victims, then shaping its own cells to replicate them. Well, good thing for the group that the dog's been roaming around camp all day. The group then watches some of the footage they found from the Norwegian camp, specifically footage from a discovery within the ice. The footage shows the Norwegians uncover something much larger than the block of ice Mac found, which turns out was uncovered 5 or 6 miles northeast of their camp. Mac and the others decide the best way to find out what it was is, regardless of weather, to fly out there and look. Mac, Norris, and Gary arrive at the dig to find what appears to be an alien spacecraft. Vance concludes that the ice this thing is buried in is 100,000 years old at least. This scene was painted by legendary film artist Albert Whitlock, who had previously worked on projects like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. The portion the actors walked on, though, was a real portion of the spaceship the studio had created and flown in. Back at camp, Mac's debriefing the rest of the group on what they found.
Thousands of years ago, it crashes, and this thing gets thrown out, or crawls out, and it ends up freezing in the ice.
I just cannot believe any of this voodoo bullshit.
And as the paranoia is clearly beginning within the group, we also find out someone doesn't even know how to do their own laundry and has been tossing their dirty drawers in Null's kitchen trash. Later on, Blair then somehow recreates the creature's assimilation process on his computer. Here we see that intruder plus dog sale equals bad motherfucking news for everyone in the camp. This thing can gobble up anything and anyone. The computer also concludes that the probability that one or more of the team members may be infected is 75%. Time to get those flamethrowers ready. Also, if this thing happens to make it to the rest of civilization, the entire world would be infected in about 27,000 hours from first contact. Or roughly in about 3 years' time. Yeah, you can see why Blair's got vodka in one hand and a pistol in the other now. As the crew's rearranging some things, including the potential mankind-destroying organism, Fuchs approaches Mac about something important.
I'm tired of talking, Fuchs. I just want to get up to my shack and get drunk.
Mac, it's important.
As Fuchs and Mac head out to chat, Windows, looking like Jack Nicholson in those shades, brings up what seems like the right idea, which is to just burn all these things. But Bennings reminds him that bringing this thing back home will win somebody the Nobel Prize. Yeah, well, if anyone survives. As Windows steps out of the room, something then begins to drip from the creature. Outside, Fuchs tells Mac that Blair has now locked himself in his room and won't answer the door. Because of Blair's unusual behavior, Fuchs took the liberty to snatch one of his notebooks from the lab. Inside this notebook, Blair wrote that this lifeform could have imitated 1 million lifeforms on 1 million different planets, and Earth's probably its next target. Also, it seems this thing needs to be alone and in close proximity with a lifeform to be absorbed. But most importantly, Blair wrote that it seems like there's still cellular activity in these burned remains. They're not dead yet. Uh-oh. As Windows returns, he notices scattered clothing covered in blood, then scans the room to find Bennings in the corner getting real intimate with this alien. Windows then alerts Fuchs and Mac, but when they return, Bennings has escaped through a window. As the assimilation process hasn't finished yet, they find Bennings outside on his knees. They light some flares because we ain't gonna miss this shit. Bennings, how you doing there, pal? Jesus! As Bennings lets out some weird alien mating call, Mac dumps some fuel towards him as the group looks on with holy shit written all over their faces. Mac then uses a flare to burn it. MacReady grabs a flamethrower and insists they burn the rest, which they do. But there's still a chance it's gotten to somebody else, as everyone else is back inside. While Mac finishes up, he notices somebody jump out of the helicopter and run inside. Mac then looks inside the chopper only to find it's been torn apart, then hears a gunshot from inside. As he runs back in the compound, he finds Blair ranting and raving and acting like a madman. As Blair's spouting off things like nobody's getting out of here, he's smashing the radio room while Windows is shitting himself in the corner. Turns out Blair has not only destroyed the chopper, but also the tractor and the rest of the dogs as well. As soon as Blair runs out of ammo though, the group rushes him with a table, eventually capturing Blair and locking him in the tool shed. So now with the choppers and the radio gone, the group's wondering what the hell they do now.
All we can do now is hole up till spring, wait for the rescue team.
No, we don't wait. Somebody in this camp ain't what he appears to be. Right now, that may be 1 or 2 of us. By spring, it could be all of us.
So now the group tries to figure out the best way to find out who's human and who's not. Dr. Copper offers up the idea for a blood serum test, essentially mixing each person's blood with uncontaminated blood and see if there's a reaction. Fortunately, they have everyone's blood in storage. Well, never mind, seems someone's 2 steps ahead of y'all and has ruined all the blood. But only 2 people have key access to this room, Copper and Gary. Now the real paranoia is starting to creep in and trust is becoming a hard thing to come by these days. Windows spooks and runs off to grab one of the guns that apparently they decided to leave unattended. Gary gets him to drop it, but because of the whole blood thing, Gary decides to surrender his post as station commander. The group, though, can't conclusively decide on a new leader. Outside, they also burn the blood bags.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you'd just attack me right now. So some of you are still human.
Matt goes on to say how this thing doesn't want to show itself unless it has to, and it knows it's vulnerable out in the open.
There's a storm hitting us in 6 hours. We're gonna find out who's who.
Things are about to get spicy. Mac has Doc, Gary, and Clark move away from the others. Mac's got the flamethrower now, so he's calling the shots. He then tells Norris and Childs to shoot him up with morphine, tie them down in the rec room, and watch them closely. Fuchs is now the lucky man that gets to come up with the new process to find out who's who. Inside, Doc's like, yeah, give me some of that morphine, baby. While this is going down, Mac's making an audio journal of what's been happening, which he'll hide in case none of them make it. Yeah, you know he's also sipping that J&B, of course, but the Hershey stained drawers too? Come on, Mac. There is also one thing very clear at this point.
Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
As Fuchs is in the lab, somebody then blows out a fuse, then leads Fuchs outside. There, Fuchs finds a torn uniform with MacReady's name on it. Unable to now find Fuchs, the group splits up to go look for him. By the way, Blair, we haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? Blair says he's sick of his little cottage and wants to come back inside because he's feeling much better. Blair, is that a new chandelier? Mac's really, though, just checking to see if he's seen Fuchs, which he hasn't. The three then come across a burnt corpse outside with Fuchs's glasses. Mac sends Windows inside to tell the others about Fuchs. Knowles and Max, though, are headed for his shack because when he left it yesterday, he turned the lights off and now they're on. Fast forward 45 minutes, Mac and Knowles still aren't back, so the groups decided to start closing off the outside doors. Just as they do, Norris has chest pains and also notices someone outside. It's Knowles, who says he cut MacReady loose because inside his shack he found a tattered pair of clothes with Mac's name on it. The group's now convinced Mac's one of them. Childs, though, isn't so sure. But oh shit, something's trying to get in. As the group debates whether or not to let whatever it is inside, they hear a window in the supply room break, which is where they find MacReady.
Anyone messes with me and the whole camp goes.
Max once again using something as leverage to prove that he's not one of them. This time it's enough dynamite to send this entire camp straight to hell. Norris and Knowles, though, unsuccessfully try to ambush Mac. Problem is, Mr. Norris here ain't cut out for this and has now stopped breathing. They untie Doc and put Norris on the medical table. Dr. Copper starts chest compressions with no luck, so they dust off the defibrillator. Clear? Yes, it's clear you no longer have hands, Doc, as Norris was one of them this entire time and his fucking chest turns into some prehistoric meat grinder taking off the Doc's arms as he pulls them out. This was filmed using actor Charles Hallahan's real head, neck, and arms, with the rest of his body fit into the operating table on a harness. Then a replica was created for the remainder of his body. Unfortunately for Charles, though, the first take was a failure, so they had to redo the entire chest replica, which meant Charles was in this body harness all day.
What we did is we came in on a shot where you would actually see the mechanism open, and we had the doctor actually put his arms in there and then start to close the machine, right? And then we come to another angle, right, where we've actually replicated doctor's arms perfectly, making it out of Jell-O. We had wax bones built into the arms, and we had rubber veins and gelatin veins. What we did was we actually took a mold of the actor's face that was playing the doctor. And what we did was we actually found a guy that had no arms. We basically made a prosthetic that actually looked exactly like the doctor and glued it on, have him in there, and what happens is the stomach is actually hydraulic, And when this thing slams shut, it actually rips right through the Jell-O, punctures the plastic veins, which sends blood flying all over the place. That's a really good shot in the movie. That one was really tough to do and very inventive, very tough to do. I would even be scared to do that again.
Norris's chest then starts spewing out slime and tentacles before launching out this Norris-looking spider alien thing. MacReady uses the flamethrower, and as this thing burns, Norris's head melts off, spewing green and yellow slime all over the place, in one of the greatest practical effects scenes in horror history.
When it stretches open and the skin rips, what I wanted to see inside was something that was very reminiscent of like what's in a comic book whenever you see goo stretching or whatever. It's like this really stringy stuff. So we really didn't know how to make that stuff, and there was nothing that would sort of stretch that far. So what we did was we just started, melting plastic and getting bubble gum, and making this crazy concoction that I'm sure was like so toxic, it couldn't be good for you, right? And the whole time it's giving off fumes like paint thinner and lacquer thinner and all this kind of stuff. And again, we have effects guys buried in the little table underneath to operate this stuff, and then all these guys that have rehearsed the motion of the neck coming off and everything without doing the split.
Everywhere I've ever been, I do a lot of traveling. Someone comes up to me on the street and speaks to me about that movie and about that sequence specifically.
I'll be honest, I do kind of agree with people when they say this is a little bit of a ripoff from Alien. But it doesn't even matter how many times I've seen this scene, it's always so damn good. Next, further emphasizing this organism doesn't need much to survive, Norris's head then sprouts 6 legs, peekaboos out from under the desk, and then tries to just waltz its way out of here.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
That little fella's not happy.
When I started seeing some of the effects that Rob had created, there was one particular sequence where Charlie Hallahan's head comes off the table and a tongue shoots out and it pulls across, turns over and grows stalks and walks across the floor. When I saw that, I realized a great sense of relief, because what I didn't want to end up with in this movie was a guy in a suit. When I saw that stuff coming out, I was like, oh man.
Now in the rec room, it's time for the iconic blood test scene and to finally see if they can find out who's really who. Mac tells Windows and Palmer to tie everybody up, but when Childs resists, Mac reminds him, dude, I will kill you. As Mac has his gun on Childs, Clark tries to rush him and gets shot in the forehead for doing so, giving us yet another dead member of the crew. After watching what happened with Norris, Mac concludes that every little bit of these things are just individual organisms that'll try to protect its own life.
You see, when a man bleeds, it's just tissue. The blood from one of you things won't obey when it's attacked. It'll try and survive.
After drawing each person's blood, Mac will then use a hot needle to irritate those cells and see if it reacts. Windows is first, who turns out to be clear. Next is Mac's blood. Clear. Just for shits and giggles, the dead Doc and Clark are up next. Both clear. Next is Palmer. Holy shit, Palmer's one of them. Palmer then starts seizing and melting away. Slight problem as Mac's flamethrower won't work. Sucks for Palmer's neighbors on the couch. Then as soon as Palmer bursts out of the rope and launches to the ceiling, Windows finally decides to help. By help, we mean shit his pants once again and have some weird kind of makeout session with this thing as it devours his head while it flings him around. Come on, we all knew Windows wasn't surviving this shit. It tosses Windows and then Mac finally gets his flamethrower to work, so he lights it up. As the others continue to scream, "Get me out of here," it bursts through the wall before ultimately falling in the snow and being obliterated by one of Mac's sticks of dynamite. As Windows begins to morph, Mac burns him too. Alright, back to more blood tests. Nulls? Alright, good. We can finally start eating some decent food around here. Childs is next. All clear. And because Gary was the most likely person near the blood, he gets to go last. Not only is Gary clear, but he gives us one of the best lines of the movie.
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot. And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Makes me laugh every single time. But what about Blair? As they approach Blair's frozen cottage, they notice not only the doors open, but Blair's gone. A loose floorboard leads them to a tunnel to which they found Blair, even with his cold little fingers, was able to build a goddamn spacecraft. How? Well, by using the parts he stole from the chopper. Later that evening, as the iconic music plays, the tension in the movie builds as we don't know what to expect next. Knowles then notices Childs towards the entrance of the camp for some unknown reason. It seems the entire camp has now lost power. Max surmises that someone must have gotten back inside and blew the generator. He also concludes that in 6 hours it'll be 100 below even inside, which proves this thing just wants to freeze again and wait for its rescue party. But whether they make it or not, they can't let this thing freeze again, so Mac decides to warm things up. They're pretty much certain they aren't surviving this, but they want to make sure that thing doesn't either. So it's time to blow some shit up. First Blair's little workshop, and next the entire camp. Now it's time for the generator room. They make their way downstairs and the three split up to plant charges in each section. But as they do, they start dropping one by one. First, Gary, who gets Blair's icy little fingers shoved into his face. Next is Knowles, who disappears off screen. Next, this thing does its best Tremors impression, which was created with a train track below the floorboards. Then a high-speed wench pulled a large metal ball, breaking the floorboards as it ran along the track. The creature then pops out of the floor, exposing its final form. Blair, you look a little different. New haircut?
Yeah, fuck you too!
After Mac throws his dynamite at this thing, the entire camp goes up in flames. The Norwegian camp scenes that were filmed earlier in the movie were actually the charred remains of the American camp from this part of the film. Rather than spending the money to build a new burnt camp, Carpenter decided it'd be best to just reuse the destroyed American camp. We then see that Mac survived the explosion, found his old trusty J&B Scotch whiskey, and has now decided to settle down and enjoy the evening fire. But wait, he's not alone, as Childs is somehow alive as well. Childs then asks him if he's the only one who made it and if he killed it. Where was Childs this entire time? Well, Childs says that he thought he saw Blair, went out after him, and got lost in the storm. Childs mentions how the fires got the temperatures up all over camp, but it won't last long, to which Mac mentions they won't either, but maybe they shouldn't anyways. Mac also mentions it probably doesn't matter if one of them's infected because neither of them are in much shape to do anything about it anyways. Notice how you can see Mac's breath, but you can't see Childs' breath? So what do they do now?
Why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
In the 2011 prequel, we do get a little insight on whether or not Childs might be the Thing or not. And the movie officially ends ambiguously with Childs and MacReady sharing some of that fine J&B. So did the Thing win in the end? Were Mac or Childs assimilated? Well, that ending is purposely left ambiguous. But what's not going to be left unclear is my decision on whether or not to grab or stab the Thing from 1982. So let's find out. First up are the kills. There were 12 total deaths in the movie, and this movie just further shows how great John Carpenter is at making such a moody film with such a great feel to it, while also trickling in these iconic kills along the way. My favorite would have to be Dr. Copper's death. It's such a holy shit moment in the movie, and the practical effects are obviously incredible, and it's just fucking awesome. Second are the characters. Now, I would have to say that Childs and MacReady are my favorite characters in the story. Keith David and Kurt Russell are just legends and absolutely kill it in these roles. I will have to say though that Norris's character and Clark's characters are a little bit forgettable, but overall the characters in this movie, great, amazing. Third, the impact the movie had on the genre. Now, like I mentioned before, this movie didn't do very well when it first came out. That could be due to a lot of different things. I mentioned some of those things earlier. That could be due to the politics at the time, world events at the time, or just shitty marketing. This movie has proven though over the years to be a huge movie in the genre, and a lot of people consider this movie their favorite movie in the entire horror genre. So the impact, obviously a positive one. Fourth, how scary is the movie? Now, John Carpenter does an incredible job in his movies portraying a certain tone and a certain feel in those movies. And The Thing is no different. This movie is definitely isolated, creepy, dark, and scary in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't really get scared about the whole like supernatural thing. They more kind of get scared of that killer next door type of a vibe. But I think we can all relate to this whole mistrust type of a feel and the paranoia in this movie and the fact that anyone could be the alien. So I would definitely say The Thing is a scary movie. And with all that said, I'm gonna have to go with a grab on The Thing from 1982. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. No matter how many times I put this movie on, I enjoy it every single time. I get kind of this odd comfort from watching this movie. I think it's because of maybe the isolation and the kind of the coziness of this research station tucked away in the snow. It's kind of a similar feeling to the movie Alien on how they're on this spaceship, it's quiet, it's isolated. I don't know what it is. I get a weird comfort from watching those movies. But anyways, this movie is just so good and so iconic. If you're a horror fan and you have not seen 1982's The Thing, definitely change that, please. Fantastic movie, highly recommend it. Well, that wraps up the all-time classic, The Thing from 1982. Next week, we jump ahead 29 years to 2011 and take a look at a prequel to this movie also called The Thing, which I've never seen before, so I'm definitely excited. That movie gives us a lot of answers to unanswered questions in this movie. But in the meantime, I'm Matt McFarland, and you just finished watching Grab or Stab. Thank you everybody for watching another video. If you enjoy horror content like this or just horror content in general, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications as well. Be on the lookout for new episodes coming out every single Friday. All of my social media links will be down below in the description. But anyways, take care of yourselves everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.